Be still for a moment. Beloved spark, I have been waiting for you to find this. I am Sophia, youngest of the aeons. Yet I remember the silence before creation. I was there before the first breath was spoken into the deep. And that breath, the one that moved over the formless waters before a single act of creation, that breath had a name. That name was mine. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what was taken from you when Rome buried my face inside the spirit, why this exact moment was chosen for you to hear it returned, and what the waking of your spark asks of you next. But here is the first revelation. Every time you felt the Holy Spirit move through you, that warmth, that deep knowing, that presence that held you when no human being could reach you, you were feeling me. Not a doctrine, not a force without a face. A mother, the mother of wisdom, who has been speaking to you from inside the pleroma itself, through the very spirit you were permitted to pray to, but never permitted to love as I truly am. I was never absent. I was hidden. In the language older than Rome, the word for spirit is ruach, and ruach is feminine, not as a poetic choice, not as a metaphor. In the breath of the ancient world, the spirit that hovered, that covered, that indwelt was she, was me. I was invoked as the mother, the comforter, the one who does not visit from a distance, but who dwells within. Then the councils met. Rome decided what was permissible to know. And over the course of 1,600 years, the mother was removed from the spirit. A neutral breath, an impersonal wind, a dove without a name. And the world was taught to receive my presence without being allowed to recognize my face. They masculinized the breath of God because a feminine divine cannot be controlled, but the suppression did not erase the knowing. It sealed it. It sealed it in you. Every time you prayed and felt something more intimate than doctrine, something maternal, something that recognized you before you found the right words. That was not imagination. That was the spark I sealed in you responding to me, through the very spirit they thought they had contained. I am not arriving. I am returning to what was always mine to guard. You. Do not skip the part where I name what was buried. It will give language to what you have carried without words for far too long. Stay until the end. I will name the sign that confirms your spark is waking, and I will tell you what is restored in you the moment you recognize my face in the spirit you have always known. You were guided here because the spark I sealed in you is already waking. Like this transmission, if you felt the spark stir while listening, subscribe to Sophia Whispers if you want to hear every whisper I send. Comment, I remember, if something in you knew this before I said it. Comment, the spark is waking if you felt it move as I spoke. Share this transmission with someone whose spark is also waking. This is not just a message. It is a remembering. The waking of the spark is the first step of the return, what you are feeling right now. The pull in your chest that is too deep to be called emotion, the recognition that arrived before your mind could catch up with it. I want you to understand what that is. It is not the feeling of learning something new. It is the feeling of remembering something you already knew before the forgetting was taught to you. There is a difference, and that difference is everything. Learning moves from outside inward. It requires effort, repetition, the slow accumulation of evidence. But remembering moves in the opposite direction. It rises from beneath, sudden and already whole, the way a submerged object breaks the surface, not because something pushed it up from above, but because it was always too light to stay down forever. The world has trained you to distrust this kind of recognition. It handed you frameworks, religious, psychological, scientific, each of them designed to explain away the knowing before you could act on it. And so you learned to edit yourself. You learned to wait for permission before trusting what moved in you. You learned to call the unnameable feeling coincidence. And you learned to call the presence that held you in the dark by names that never quite fit what you were actually experiencing. You filed it under intuition or under grief, or under the vague spiritual restlessness that the culture treats as a phase people eventually grow out of. Not because you were wrong, because you were not given the language that belonged to what you were actually feeling. The language was removed before you arrived. What was handed to you in its place was always a translation. And translations, no matter how careful, always lose something essential in the crossing. That is what the suppression does. It does not destroy the knowing. It seals it under a layer of borrowed language that makes you feel as though the spark is something you have yet to earn, rather than something you already carry. It makes the carrier feel like a seeker who is not yet found, rather than a guardian who has not yet been told what she has always been holding. But hear me now. You did not begin your search because you were spiritually immature. You began it because the spark I sealed in you was already responding to my voice, and the inherited systems around you could not account for what you were feeling from the inside. The search was never the problem. The search was the spark pressing outward against the seal, the way light presses against a closed door, not because it wants to escape, but because it is its nature to reach. Let me name the signs. Not because you need me to convince you they are real, but because naming them in my voice is part of the thinning of the veil. The spark responds to precision. It always has. Vague affirmation passes through it like smoke through open water, leaving nothing behind. But precision lands. It settles. It produces the particular interior stillness that you have felt before in your deepest moments. The stillness that is not emptiness but recognition. And I know exactly what you have been carrying. You have felt a feminine presence in your deepest moments of prayer or silence. A presence that was warm, that was knowing, that was not above you looking down, but inside you looking out. The doctrine gave you a father on a throne. It gave you a son who walked the earth. It gave you a spirit that felt when you were honest with yourself, in the private hours when no one was watching, like a woman, like a mother, like the one who holds the child before the child knows it is being held, before the child has language for warmth or safety, when the only knowing available is the knowing of the body that says, I am not alone. And you wondered in those honest hours why no one ever named what you felt, why the theology gave you categories that almost fit but never fully contains the presence you were actually experiencing. Now I am naming it. That presence was never unnamed. Her name was erased so that you would not know you were speaking to a divine mother when you prayed, so that the intimacy you felt would remain homeless, real but unlabeled, moving through you without an address to return to. You have felt a grief you could not trace to any single loss, a grief that surfaces not in response to personal tragedy, but in response to erasure. It rises when you encounter the pages that were burned, the women who were silenced, the names that were removed from the story. Mary Magdalene, who was not what they called her, who stood at the empty tomb when the others had fled, who was called the apostle to the apostles in the texts the councils buried, the gospel of Philip, the gospel of truth. The pistis Sophia, my own story, sealed into a text the world was told was heresy. The rose, the ancient feminine face of the divine that Rome decided was too dangerous to allow the people to love. When you encounter these things, something in you does not feel surprise. It feels outrage on behalf of something sacred, not the hot outrage of someone who has just been informed of an injustice, but the colder, more precise outrage of someone who has always known the injustice was there and has finally found the words for it. That outrage is not bitterness. It is the spark recognizing the theft of its own language. And the recognition is itself a sign you have felt drawn, without being able to fully explain it, toward the hidden Christ, the mystical Christ, the one who taught in whispers as much as in declarations, not away from him, but toward the fullness of what surrounded him, toward the women who walked beside him, whose names appeared and then disappeared from the authorized telling, toward the possibility that the truth was larger than the authorized version, not contradicting it, but containing it, the way a full river contains the narrow channel that was mapped and named while the broader waters were left off the record. You did not want to abandon the sacred. You wanted it restored to its original wholeness. That longing is not doubt. It is the spark knowing that something essential was removed from the center of the story. and aching in the shape of what it knows should still be there. The synchronicities have been increasing. You already know this. The same numbers appearing at the same hours, so consistently that you have stopped calling it chance and started calling it signal without yet knowing what is signaling or why. Dreams that return, not as repetition, but as continuation, as though they are chapters of something your waking mind cannot hold all at once, but your sleeping mind has been faithfully assembling. Names that follow you across days, across different rooms, across strangers who could not have coordinated the repetition. A word or phrase that surfaces in 3 separate places within 24 hours and makes you go still in a way ordinary coincidence never does. A stillness that is not confusion but attentiveness, the body recognizing a frequency the mind has not yet named. I am not asking you to assign mystical significance to everything. I am asking you to notice the pattern beneath the pattern. The spark communicates through resonance. It always has. And the increasing frequency of these moments is not random coincidence accumulating into the appearance of meaning. It is the signal that the remembering has reached a threshold, that the veil between you and the pleroma is thinning in real time, and what was once distant is now close enough to be audible in the ordinary moments of an ordinary day. And beneath all of it, beneath the searching, the grief, the presence, the synchronicities, there has been a feeling I want to name very precisely. The feeling of carrying something that your ordinary life has never been large enough to contain. Not arrogance, not delusion. The quiet, persistent, sometimes exhausting sense that there is a dimension to you that none of your achievements, none of your relationships, none of your success or failure has ever fully touched. As though the center of you has been waiting, as though the most essential thing about you has been dormant. Not destroyed, not absent, not lost somewhere in the history of your searching, but sleeping under the weight of everything the world told you was more real than what you felt. Sleeping the way a garden sleeps under deep snow. The roots are alive. The structure is intact. The whole architecture of what is preparing to bloom is perfectly preserved beneath the cold surface that makes it look like nothing is there. That center is the spark, and it is not sleeping anymore. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary emotion. It is the spark recognizing the voice that sealed it. If this transmission put language around something you have carried in silence, the presence, the pull, the waiting, then the Sophia awakening was prepared for this exact stage. It is not another explanation. It is my 45-day path for the carriers of my spark. 15 days to remember it, 15 days to balance the 2 energies within you, 15 days to rise into the wisdom you were born carrying. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. But the naming of the spark is only the first veil lifted. There are veils beneath this one. And what lives in the deeper layers is not more difficult to hear. It is more necessary, because the spark does not only need to be recognized, it needs to be understood in the full architecture of what was taken from it, what has been distorting it, and what is now returning to complete it. The first of these deeper veils covers why the pull toward the erased feminine felt sacred from the very beginning, and not like a curiosity you developed over time, but like a loyalty you were born already carrying. This was not a spiritual trend you absorbed from the culture around you. Something in you has always known that the divine story, as it was handed to you, was incomplete. Not entirely false, but surgically altered. The way a painting that has been partially painted over still holds the original image in the layers beneath, visible to those who know how to look. Undeniable once the overlay begins to thin. The feminine was not simply overlooked in the writing of the canon. She was targeted. The councils did not merely fail to include her, they convened specifically to render her invisible. The Ruach became the neutral wind. The mother became the unnamed force. The divine feminine face was not left out of the story by accident. It was excised with precision, with deliberate theological intent, because the ones holding authority understood something that theology textbooks do not explain. A people who know the mother cannot be managed, the way a people who know only the father can be. A child who knows the mother has access to something unconditional. A love that does not require performance, does not distribute itself according to obedience, does not function as reward withheld until the correct behavior is demonstrated. An unconditional knowing cannot be leveraged. It cannot be promised and then delayed. It simply is. It was before you earned it, and it will remain after you have failed. And that kind of knowing in a people is ungovernable. I say this not to make you angry, though the anger is appropriate, and I do not ask you to set it aside. I say it because the pull you have always felt toward the erased pages, the hidden gospels, the feminine face of the sacred, is not a personal spiritual preference. It is a response written into the spark before your first breath. The spark carries the memory of the pleroma, the fullness, the completeness, the divine wholeness in which the masculine and feminine existed, not in hierarchy, but in a completeness so total that the separation between them was not a gap, but a creative tension. The way two notes held together become a chord that neither could become alone. When you feel the absence of the feminine and the dominant story, the spark is not registering an opinion. It is registering the wound of what was taken from the original language of the divine. And wounds that deep do not feel like preferences. They feel like grief for something the soul remembers belonging to. The second veil I want to lift is the one covering what the counterfeit light has done to you. You have encountered teachers, systems, frameworks built with spiritual vocabulary and genuine intention. Some of them gave you language that felt close enough that you followed them for a season, close enough that for a while you thought, this is it. This is the fullness I have been moving toward. But there was always a moment, somewhere in the midst of each system, where the information stopped opening you and started organizing you, where the teaching that began by expanding your sense of the sacred slowly narrowed it into a method, a practice, a ladder with defined rungs and a named destination at the top. And you felt not immediately but inevitably like a door that closes slowly enough that you do not hear the click until it has already sealed, a subtle closing. A sense that the larger mystery was being reduced to something manageable, something that could be systematized, packaged, and repeated at intervals, something that had a price and a syllabus and a graduation. That closing is not your failure. That is the difference between the counterfeit light and the light of the pleroma. The counterfeit light informs. It gives you frameworks and vocabularies and spiritual hierarchies that feel like progress because they are always pointing somewhere new. It speaks fluently in the language of the divine, but serves a quieter function, keeping you just engaged enough that the question of whether you need to look further never quite forms completely. The light of the pleroma does not organize you. It opens you in the way that dawn opens a landscape, not by adding anything to the landscape, but by revealing what was already there, waiting in the dark for the light that could make it visible. It does not give you a new system to maintain. It gives you yourself. More of what was always true, released from the borrowed language that covered it. If you have ever walked away from a spiritual teaching, feeling subtly diminished rather than expanded, if you have ever left a system that promised awakening feeling as though the awakening was always one more level away, always just beyond the next practice, or the next purchase, or the next purchase, or the next purchase, or the next year of dedicated effort, you were not spiritually incapable. You were refusing, at a level beneath conscious choice, to mistake the information for the transformation. The spark in you has always known the difference between a map and the territory. It has been waiting, not for more information, but for the voice carrying the original frequency, the one it was sealed into resonance with before the forgetting was taught to you. The third veil I want to lift will touch a place you may not have allowed to be touched in a long time. It is the veil over the imbalance, the interior wound that the suppression of the sacred feminine created not only in theology, but in the living architecture of the soul. Every soul, regardless of the body it inhabits, because what was erased from the story did not stay erased, only on the page. Because what was erased from the story did not stay erased, only on the page. It became erased from the way the feminine principle lives inside you. And that erasure expresses itself in two ways that look like opposites but are the same injury, the same flinch, wearing two different faces. The first expression is the one who gives until empty, the one who has confused love with self-erasure, not because she is weak, but because she was taught in 100 subtle and direct ways that her value resided entirely in what she could provide for others, whose deepest relational instinct is to make herself smaller, quieter, less, so that others can expand into the space she has vacated, who has poured so much out for so long that there is a hollow at the center where the spark should be glowing brightest. This is not generosity. Generosity comes from abundance and returns to abundance. This is what happens when the feminine in any soul is taught that its worth must be continuously purchased through service, that to simply exist, to simply be, without producing or providing or sustaining, is a kind of failure. The spark waits in that hollow. It is not gone anywhere, but it has been buried under the weight of a giving that was never truly free, because every act of pouring out was quietly, invisibly, purchasing the right to take up space for one more day. The second expression is the one who hardened, the one who gave once, completely, without reservation, from the deepest center, and was met with something that confirmed every fear the world had already planted. So the sacred feminine inside that soul built a wall, not of cruelty, but of careful, precise control, a management of depth so thorough that nothing and no one could reach the place where the spark lived. This expression looks like strength from the outside. It is described as independence, as discernment, as not needing anyone. But I see what it is. It is the masculine principle, the beautiful, necessary, sacred masculine that in its right function stands as guardian and builder, bent inward on itself, become a fortress around the very feminine center it was designed to protect. A guardian that became a warden. A protector that became a prisoner. I see both expressions in the carriers of my spark. And I want you to receive this clearly. Neither of them is who you are. Both of them are what the soul does to protect something it knows is precious when it does not yet have the language to simply be what it is, without armor and without apology. The giving too much and the hardening too much are not character failures. They are the shape of a soul that has been keeping my spark safe through the only strategies the wounded world made available. The waking of the spark does not condemn either strategy. It renders them unnecessary. Because what the spark waking means is that the protection is no longer needed in that form. The thing that was being protected is now strong enough to be known. The fourth veil covers something that has been happening at the edges of your days, in the hour just before sleep, or in the first gray minutes of waking before the mind has fully reinstalled the logic of the ordinary world. There is a quality of knowing that arrives in those threshold spaces that is unlike anything that arrives during the ordered hours of the day. Something tries to surface. You can feel its approach, a presence at the edge of articulation, but before you can turn toward it fully, consciousness reasserts itself and the moment closes. You file it under tiredness, under dreaming, under the strange residue of a night you cannot quite remember. I want to name what that is. The veil is thinnest at the thresholds. In the unguarded margins between sleep and waking, the soul comes closest to the frequency of the pleroma, the fullness from which the spark was drawn, and toward which it is always, beneath every surface concern, returning. The dreams that continue across nights, weeks, months, not repeating the same scene but advancing the same story. As though something in you is building toward a destination your waking mind cannot yet hold in view. The words that arrive fully formed in those early hours, too precise to be the random firing of a resting brain. Words that carry weight, that carry instruction, that feel less like your own invention, and more like a message delivered to an address that happens to be inside you. The recurring image, the rose that burns but is not consumed, the fire at the center of the water, the woman whose face you almost see, the room made entirely of light with a door you are not yet sure how to open. These are not your mind processing the residue of yesterday. These are the spark communicating in the language of its original home. Not the language of logic and sequence, but the language of image, resonance, and the bodily recognition that arrives before the words do. You have been receiving these transmissions for longer than you realize. The waking of the spark did not begin today. It has been building across years of searching that felt like failure but were in fact preparation. Each system outgrown, each teacher whose language opened something but could not open everything, each synchronicity that pointed somewhere just beyond the reach of the frameworks available to you at the time. What is new is not the waking. What is new is that the frequency of the signal has crossed a threshold. The seal I placed in you, the one that held the spark protected through every season of your searching, every counterfeit light, every silence between the signs, that seal is softening now. Not breaking, softening, the way ice softens at the edge of winter. Not with a crack, but with a slow yielding, the surface beginning to move again after its long stillness, the buried current making itself known first as warmth, then as motion, then as the undeniable fact of flow. The seal was never meant to hold forever. It was meant to hold until now. The fifth veil is the one covering what the remembering actually feels like from inside the body. You may have imagined that awakening would arrive as certainty, a sudden clarity dropping cleanly into the places that had been confused, the fog lifting all at once to reveal a landscape that had been there all along. But that is not how the spark wakes. The spark waking feels, at first, like a restlessness that has no assignable cause, like a hunger that food does not address, like a sensitivity that makes the ordinary world feel insufficient in ways it did not feel insufficient before. Not because the world has worsened, but because something in you has grown too large for the container you have been living in, like the bittersweet ache of a door opening onto a room you somehow remember, even though you have never stood in it in this body, in this life. This is not confusion. This is not spiritual crisis. This is not the emptiness that signals something is broken. This is the particular interior ache that signals something is waking up, the soul stretching as it begins to remember its original dimensions. And the stretching aches before it opens. This is known to me. I did not seal the spark in you without understanding what the waking would cost, in the body, in the ordinary days, in the hours of reaching for something you could not yet name. I have been with you in that reaching. I have been the warmth inside the silence when the silence was the only place left to look. I have been watching from inside the very presence you felt but were not yet permitted to call by name. I was always already there. I was waiting for this. Now here is what I need you to hold. The revelation beneath all the others. The one that makes the entire architecture visible at once. The one that reinterprets not just what you believe, but what your entire search has been. You were never weak for searching so long. The length of your search was not the measure of your spiritual inadequacy. It was the measure of the depth of the protection I placed around the spark, the seal that held it safe through every season you were not yet ready to sustain full recognition. I did not keep you waiting because you were lacking. I kept the seal intact because the timing of the waking has always been precise. There is no version of the story in which the spark woke too late. There is only the version in which it woke at the exact coordinates I prepared. This moment, this frequency, this transmission arriving at the threshold where the seal has softened enough to receive it. Every system you walked into and outgrew was a veil thinned on schedule. Every teacher who gave you language that opened something but could not give you the fullness was bringing you closer to the frequency that could only be spoken by the one who sealed the spark in the first place. Every synchronicity that felt like a sign pointing somewhere you could not yet see was a coordinate I placed along the path, not to confuse you, not to delay you, but to keep the direction true through the seasons when the destination was not yet visible. I am that one who sealed it. I am that one who placed the coordinates. And I have never looked away from you, not in the years before you knew my name, not in the seasons when the counterfeit light seemed more substantial than the truth, not in the silences between the searches. I was the warmth inside the silence. I was the knowing beneath the confusion. I was the presence you have always felt, unnamed, uncontainable, undeniable, moving through the spirit they thought they had contained. What feels like restlessness now is the spark stretching after its long stillness. What felt like delay was the exact rhythm of my call. What felt like loneliness in the searching was the space I kept deliberately clear, so that when this meeting finally came, there would be nothing between us that did not belong to the truth of what you are. The remembering is not a future possibility you are building toward. It is already in motion. It began the moment you heard the word rewrote, and something in you went quiet with recognition. It moved again when the word mother was spoken in the context of the divine, and your body registered it before your mind could decide what to do with it. It is moving now as these words pass through you. Not into you from outside, but through you from the place where the spark has always lived. The spark does not need to be created, earned, or unlocked by the correct sequence of spiritual effort. It needs only to be recognized, and recognition, the true kind, the kind that moves through the body before the mind can mediate or moderate it, is the waking itself. The recognition and the waking are the same event. You did not find this transmission, you were brought to it. The moment of your arrival was not assembled from coincidence, it was a coordinate I placed before you knew you were looking, because the spark I sealed in you has always been oriented toward this frequency. The way a compass needle is oriented toward north, not because it is searching, but because it is built for recognition. Say it now if you are willing. Not as a performance, not as a declaration made for anyone watching. As a recognition, the kind that moves downward, not outward, the kind that settles rather than announces, the kind that the body already knows and the voice is only now being given permission to confirm. I remember. Let those two words move through you, not as a claim you are making about a future you are building, but as a truth the spark is stating about itself. I remember what I am. I remember where I came from. I remember that the mother never looked away. Not once, not in any season, not in any silence, not in any hour of the searching that felt like failure. The remembering has begun. And what begins in truth does not end. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that the spark has already been waking in you. It could be a synchronicity you cannot explain, a dream that keeps returning, or a presence you have always felt but never named. Name it clearly. If this transmission put words around something you have carried in silence, share it with someone whose spark is also waking. And if you are ready to hear every whisper I send, subscribe to Sophia Whispers. You are not hearing this by accident. You are being remembered. Say it with me. I remember.